Greetings fellow mammals, at level 36 you unlock the MP9. This is the setup I recommend for it. I will explain those picks in just a moment. And we will of course also re-evaluate the current A-tier placement of this gun. But first off, like always, we will deep dive into the time to kill charts. This time we have 3 ammo types at hand. And to my and your surprise, all of them are actually worth using. That's rare in this game, so let's see how that happened. First off, we got close combat ammo. Pretty normal SMG type graph, but the time to kill is in a good spot here, especially if we consider we get both a 50 and a 40 round magazine option for this ammo type. And that leads us into standard ammo. As you can see, this one is basically an upgraded version of close combat. Weirdly, it has the exact same rate of fire, one of the many either bugs or weird balancing choices we have already and will continue to encounter in these videos. Either way, this means that standard should be the obvious pick here, right? Not necessarily. Let me add some caveats for further balancing context. Number 1, the MP9 is an SMG. That means it has a recoil and especially a spread that reflects that role. So beyond roughly 60 meters you shouldn't really engage anyone if you can avoid it. And if we look for that range, let me add a visual marker here so you can see that a bit better. There we go. We can see that the only real improvement we actually benefit from with standard is that shift from a 30 meter first range to a 40 meter one. That is still a pretty nice increase in one of the most important ranges, but it also brings us to caveat number 2. With standard ammo, the biggest magazine option we get is just a 30 rounder. And so you have to make a personal choice now. What is more important to you? A 10 meter buffed first range or having 20 more rounds in your magazine? While you answer that for yourself, let me introduce the last ammo type, subsonic. This one has a slightly lower RPM, so the time to kill is a bit higher. But let me point out that the difference we are talking about here is about 20 milliseconds in the relevant ranges. So that's not really a noticeable downside. We do get a much better mid-range performance though, so that arguably balances it out anyway. Which brings me to the reasoning for my personal picks. You might have answered the first question in your head by now, close combat or standard. Well, for me it's close combat. Having 50 rounds instead of 30 just makes a massive difference in a bunch more situations than having a slightly increased range. So for my main slot I picked the close combat drum mag. Now for the second slot you could actually ask the same question again, just that now the difference has scaled down to a 40 round magazine versus the 30 rounder. I would argue at this point it makes perfect sense to pick standard if you are content with 30 rounds usually, but I still prefer having the bigger magazine. So for me it's close combat again. And since a 30 round close combat magazine clearly loses against a 30 round standard one, we don't have to ask that final question, but that shifts it to the distant cousin instead, subsonic, which is a bit weird actually, because that one has a 26 round magazine. So do you want a 20 millisecond worse time to kill with 4 less bullets but a much better mid-range and the much overlooked bonus of having no bullet tracers? Or do you want the 30 round standard ammo? To be clear, standard is still a good pick. I tried all of these ammo types and every single one worked very well for me. I have no complaints really, apart from the weird magazine size for subsonic, but as long as a fully automatic weapon stays above 25 rounds, I'm fine. I just really dislike going below that, so I picked subsonic over standard. And there is another reason why I did that. If we take a look at the barrel section, we can see a whole bunch of options. Actually it should be even more, but the Arcom muzzle brake is still not fixed as of recording this. I don't know what to say about that issue anymore, honestly. Yeah. I actually liked using the Arcom and the MP9 in the past, so whenever that finally returns, try it out, maybe it suits you better than what I have to recommend now. Instead of the Arcom, my go-to at this moment is the tactical compensator. Recoil really isn't an issue on this gun, and the slight accuracy increase you get with this can somewhat help when you are trying to microburst people that are out of your comfortable ranges. Inside your comfortable ranges, we can do a whole nother thing though, being sneaky. As you can see, we can pick and choose from all of the 4 suppressors this game offers. Like always, avoid the 6KU and PB heavy at all costs. Those lower your damage and 99% of the time that results in a higher bullet to kill and therefore time to kill. basically nerfing your weapon into nirvana. There are very few exceptions to this rule. Weapons that have specific damage values that are just high enough to not suffer a downgrade from these attachments do exist, but be sure I will cover those when we encounter them. The MP9 is not part of that illustrious group though, so here the rule applies. And that means we can default to our longtime favorite, the Rep Suppressor. Nothing wrong with that choice. But this is where the Type 4 Heavy Suppressor comes in. This one also lowers your damage, but not as much as the 6KU and PB Heavy. So more often than not, this one is actually useful. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of guns it is available for, but here we do get it. And the good news is, even with the damage reduction it comes with, we can keep hold of the exact same time to kill for the first 3 ranges of each ammo type. So let me just bring the chart back up real quick. If you just take a look at the steps, you can see that this means for close combat nothing is affected up to 75 meters, and for standard and subsonic we're even good up to 100 meters. And since 60 meters is really the top end we should engage in, that means we can actually use this heavy suppressor with all of our ammo types. That is very unique and very cool, because it means instead of the 30 meter minimap stealth radius we can get with our usual Rep Suppressor, with this one we can cut that in half into a 15 meter radius. And what is even better, if we combine suppressors with subsonic ammo, those numbers get reduced by 15 again. So we already get 15 meters with the Rep Suppressor instead of 30, but with the Type 4 we actually get 0 meters instead of 15. That means if we use the Type 4 suppressor in tandem with subsonic ammo, we will stay off the minimap completely, and that is combined with having no tracers and no muzzle flash. So not only can enemies not see where you are shooting from, you literally won't even appear on their minimap anymore. Only manual spotting and gadgets like Tux or Soflam will still make you visible on the map for a few seconds. But since most players don't even know which button that is or what these gadgets do, you will usually be invisible for 90% of the time. That makes flanking insanely easy, and it is a setup I very much enjoy myself. The only downside, as I pointed out before, is the rather low magazine size with 26 rounds. That is a bit annoying, but otherwise it's great fun. Now what do we have for the underbarrel section? Well, somewhat what you'd expect in such a small weapon. As always, I prefer the LWG grip. If you value hipfire higher than ADS, pick the LS1 laser. Don't use the big laser. I will explain why in a future video. I am working on that script already, so I'm not gonna deep dive into that right now. Just don't use them. If you want to, you can carry both the LWG grip and the LS1 laser, of course, although I can't really see how that would work in practice, but that's up to you. And the third slot can be left empty. For the sights, we are once again back to the good old trio: red dot, thermal, 4x switchable. And that's the setup. A final comment on this chapter, if I may. As I said, all ammo types are actually worth using on this weapon. So if you couldn't decide on one earlier, just try them all out. Maybe play 1 or 2 matches with each and see what feels best to you. In my play session, I did enjoy all of them. I just prefer having a bigger magazine or full stealth in the end. That's it. And regarding stealth, it would actually also be just fine if you run the Type 4 suppressor as your default barrel, because as I explained, it works perfectly fine with every ammo type in the relevant ranges. And that means even if you don't run subsonic ammo, you can benefit from the improved stealth range of 50 meters. That is pretty good already. Having a 50 round close combat magazine and 50 meter minimap stealth is a really nice combo. So from all of this, I get a really positive impression of this weapon. If almost everything about this is useful and worth trying, why is it A and not S tier? Well, that is because of 2 very simple facts: the time to kill and subsonic's magazine size. Don't get me wrong, the time to kill is not slow, but it also isn't incredibly fast. It sits in that range where you can't really complain, but you also can't really boast about it either. And the stealth setup with subsonic is really unique, since the MP9 is the only SMG that can pull it off successfully right now. But 26 rounds, that is just not S tier worthy enough. It is very close though. If we broke this list down even more, the MP9 would likely be an A+. If that time to kill would go from 270 down to 220 or 240 milliseconds, or the subsonic magazine inflates up to 40 or at least 35 rounds, that might just be enough to lift it up to S tier if you ask me. But for now it will remain in its well-earned spot in A tier. The MP9 was quite bad over a large amount of patches and time, and therefore it's a weapon you rarely see in use. But it has sneakily climbed up the ladder one step at a time over the months and years. And today I can comfortably recommend it to anyone that enjoys SMGs to give it a chance, even if it's just to use something else than the PP29 for once. And don't forget to play around with all the options you get here. It's quite fun. If you enjoyed this episode, share, like and subscribe. You know the drill. Next up we have a rather unique weapon in this category, the AC-42, a burst assault rifle. So if you don't want to miss that video, you might also want to activate the bell to override the algorithm making choices for you. Until then, I will see you on the battlefield. Sorrow out.